Hello, welcome to Legal Resources by Tracy Hall. My purpose today is to describe the use and the content of United States Code, Congressional, and Administrative News. Long title, I have to concentrate to remember it. And so I will begin with how a bill becomes a law, because the content of United States Code, Congressional, and Administrative News is the process that has been undertaken to pass a bill into law. All right. How a bill becomes a law. If a bill is conceived by a citizen like you or me, or an advocacy group, it still needs to be funneled through one of the chambers, the House of Representatives or the Senate. More often, bills are submitted by congressional members, and I think it's more common for them to be conceived in the House of Representatives, but it could go either way. A drafted bill is supported by a primary sponsor and by other members who are co-sponsors. The bill is introduced, if by a representative, then to the House of Representatives. If by a senator, it's introduced to the Senate. The bill goes to a committee that specializes in its subject matter. That committee determines the likelihood that it could pass the entire Congress. If they do not act on the bill, it is considered dead. If they do, they may conduct hearings to solicit the views of the executive branch, experts, other public officials, and supporters and opponents of the legislation. All of this goes into the record, and much of the record we will find in USCCAN, United States Code, Congressional, and Administrative News. Step 4, a subcommittee reviews the bill, so a committee within the committee. There may be a subcommittee that will analyze, possibly hold hearings, and perhaps edit the bill, which then goes back to the entire committee. The entire committee does a markup of the bill with amendments. At this point, they may vote not to report legislation to the floor, full chamber of Congress, and let it die. Or it will go to the next step, which is the bill is introduced to the full chamber, where there is the chamber being either the House of Representatives or the Senate, where there is likely more debate, and it is voted on. It is passed or defeated by the members voting. The bill is sent to the other chamber, where it goes through the same process. It may die at this point, or if it is amended by the other chamber, a conference committee made up from both sides is formed. The conference committee will seek to reconcile the versions. They will submit a report with recommendations for a final bill. In the end, both chambers must pass the resulting bill. So then, if the bill passed the House and the Senate, the bill that has been approved in its entirety by both chambers goes to the president. If the president approves of the legislation, it is signed and becomes law. If the president takes no action for 10 days while Congress is in session, the bill automatically becomes law. If the president opposes the bill, he may veto the bill. In addition, if no action is taken for 10 days and Congress has already adjourned, there is a pocket veto. The veto may be overridden. If the president vetoes a bill, Congress may attempt to override the veto. If both the Senate and the House pass the bill by a 2/3 majority, the president's veto is overruled and the bill becomes a law. So, as I said, much of that process is found in United States Code and Congressional Administrative News. According to the Library of Congress, these volumes contain public laws, legislative history, proclamations, executive messages and orders, administrative regulations, lists of committees, indexes, and tables for each session of Congress. So it's also known as USCAN. I'm probably going to say that more than a long title henceforth. What USCAN does not contain are the hearings, which can be found in the U.S. Congressional Information Service, aka USCIS, or just CIS, by Lexis, and speeches on the floor. You can look at the congressional record if you follow that link there. It takes you to congressional record spot online. So, West LA College's collection begins in 1947 with the 80th Congress. A couple of you may be saying, no, it doesn't. I thought it started in 1952. So hold that thought. And it continues without interruption to 2002, the 107th Congress. Where is it? Well, it's behind the reference desk in the reference section. Oh, here comes my frog. Hold that thought. See if a sip of coffee gets rid of it without my having to clear my throat. The call number begins with KF because that's the call letters for federal laws. So it's KF 48.U6. And here on our catalog record, we show 1952, as does the Library of Congress, as does Ulrich's. And nobody seems to mention that there's a predecessor. But there's, and I don't see it in the alternative titles there. I am going to have to clear my throat, sorry. So let's move on. This is what they look like when they come in during a current year, although they may not be quite so bad since those are kind of old now. This is the 1990 pamphlets that we have that we never got the bound volumes from that session. This is another picture of the same thing. This is the U.S. Code Congressional Service. Note that we're talking about the U.S. Code Congressional and Administrative News. So these start in 1947, and coincidentally, they end in 1951. They look in binding the same as and administrative news, and they look in content the same format, same contents. So I'm saying these guys are the predecessor, and they started in 1947. So there. Here we have a picture of both the U.S. Code Congressional Service are the very first two, and then U.S. Code Congressional and Administrative News are the rest of those. They come out in at least 2 volumes because the first volume is the text of the laws from that session, and the second volume is the processes that went on to pass the bills. West Group is the publisher. So what's the purpose? Why do we care about the legislative history or the processes that went into passing a law? Well, some judges in appeals courts primarily will need to, or feel they need to, research the legislative history to ascertain the legislative intent. Why did this bill come about? Who said there ought to be a law and made it so? So I think this says what I just said. If a case is referred to any kind of court of appeal, the legislative history will more than likely be examined. So like these guys, they're so happy. So that's the current Supreme Court justices. And this is a list of who's who on that slide. So, but there's a controversy. We have the intentionalists versus the textualists. So not all judges think you need or even should look at the legislative history. They don't care what inspired the bill. They care what the law says. And they only want to apply that law as it is written in the current and apply it to the current situation. Okay, so intentionalism, according to Wikipedia, original intent maintains that in interpreting a text, a court should determine what the authors of the text were trying to achieve and to give effect to what they intended the statute to accomplish, the actual text of the legislation notwithstanding. As in purposivism, tools such as legislative history, tongue twisters, are often used. Textualism, on the other hand, according to Wikipedia, is a formalist theory in which the interpretation of the law is primarily based on the ordinary meaning of the legal text, where no consideration is given to non-textual sources, such as intention of the law when passed, the problem it was intended to remedy, or significant questions regarding the justice or rectitude of the law. A quote under Oliver Wendell Holmes in Wikipedia is, "We ask not what this man meant, but what those words would mean in the mouth of a normal speaker of English, using them in the circumstances in which they are used. We do not inquire what the legislature meant. We ask only what the statutes mean." So Oliver Wendell Holmes wasn't, he didn't formally call himself a textualist. I don't know that term was around then, but this quote tells us he was. There's Oliver. He served from 1902 to 1932 as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. And I read a really good biography, but I can't tell you who the author was. Sorry, not that I won't tell you, I really don't remember. This fellow, Hugo Black, another Supreme Court associate from 1937 to 1971, was also considered a textualist. Antonin Scalia has said in at least one opinion that he's not concerned with the intent of the law, he's concerned with the text of the law. And I think maybe Clarence Thomas is another textualist, somebody else, or maybe more than one there. So they come out monthly, these USCCAN volumes, or rather the pamphlets. And at the end of the year, West binds them. When they get bound, their format changes. They're not just all squished together into bound volumes. They're actually reformatted. In that first volume, the 1947 Code Congressional Service, was this quote. I'm pretty sure it was also in the USCANs, and that was part of what made me think these are the same thing. So, the popular and exclusive feature of congressional committee comments upon the acts of Congress is retained. These comments are based upon official reports and congressional debates on important laws. They disclose valuable information regarding the background of the laws, as well as showing the legislative intent in enacting those laws. The comments are directly referenced to the laws concerned, and each will be found fully indexed therein. Wikipedia. According to Wikipedia about the content, when published in bound volumes, the legislative history documents are placed in separate volumes apart from the rest of the materials published by USCAN. Prior to the 99th Congress, the legislative history materials in USCAN contained only a House or Senate report. Since the 99th Congress, the legislative history materials in USCAN have included the House or Senate report, the committee report, and any presidential signing statements. USCAN is considered a more readily accessible source for some of these materials, like committee reports, than the originals. As a result, it is recommended by the Blue Book as a citation source, in addition to the original document. And as you know, the Blue Book is the legal profession's style manual. So then I scanned a few pages so you could get a good idea of thumbing through the books. So a title page from the 99th Congress is pretty simple. Just the title tells you it's the first session as opposed to the second session, and it's the 99th Congress. We'll leave that up. This page comes from those 1990 pamphlets. So you can see a bit of the difference. You get the date of the issue and the table of contents. So the 101st Congress, let me say it now so I don't forget. When a bill gets a number, when a bill gets passed, it gets a number. The number will be the congressional session dash whatever bill it is chronologically. So if it's the 101st Congress, the bill will be 101 dash. If it's the very first one they passed in that session, or rather it says first session, second session, in both sessions. If it's the very first one passed for that Congress, it'll be -1. So in this particular volume, being issue number 1, we're already up to 241. So the first session passed 240 bills into law. Alrighty. So looking at some of the documents contained in the volumes, we have selected committee reports from the House and the Senate. So let's look at Indian lands rights of way. This PDF has a few things illustrated here, so we have to scroll down. There it is, House report number, Senate report number. So it's not until it passed that it gets what I just described, the numbering system I just described. So here it says, the Senate report repeats in substance the contents of the House report and contains a more detailed analysis of the legislation. So we get the Senate report. This one is relatively short. Explanation of the bill. And there's the end of it. Some of them go on for pages and pages, which is why sometimes there's more than 2 volumes. Another committee report, Intelligence Authorization Act. 1987, Public Law 100-178, gives you page number, House report, Senate report, Senate report. The House bill was passed in lieu of the Senate bill. The House reports, parts 1, this page, etc. So that's what that looks like, the first page of it anyway. Signing statements. A signing statement is a written pronouncement issued by the President of the United States upon signing a bill into law. They are usually printed along with the bill in United States Code, Congressional, and Administrative News, USCAN. The statements begin with wording such as, "This bill, which I have signed today," and continue with a brief description of the bill and often several paragraphs of political commentary, according to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is not lying. We shall see that President Bush does begin his statement with, "I am pleased today to sign into law H.R. 901, the Veterans Benefits Amendments of 1989. This bill will increase certain benefits paid to veterans and make other improvements in veterans programs," etc. So, according to the Justice Department, the legislative history signing statement originated in the Reagan administration. In 1986, then Attorney General Meese entered into an arrangement with West Publishing Company to have presidential signing statements published for the first time in the U.S. Code, Congressional, and Administrative News. So it's exclusive to these volumes. The standard collection of legislative history. Attorney General Meese explained the purpose of his action as follows: to make sure that the president's own understanding of what's in a bill is the same or is given consideration at the time of statutory construction later on by a court. We have now arranged with the West Publishing Company that the presidential statement on the signing of a bill will accompany the legislative history from Congress so that all can be available to the court for future construction of what that statute really means. So as you can imagine, this too is controversial. Some folks feel that the president's statement may be given more weight than all of the other material, and they don't like that. Okay, so we're going from statements to proclamations. So what is President Lincoln's famous proclamation? I'll let you think about that for a couple seconds. So here's a couple of proclamations within our sets: National Farm Safety Week and Mother's Day. Proclamations are down there near the end. National Farm Safety Week. Whereas needless hazards on the farms of our nation continue to cause thousands of accidents each year, which could be prevented by a positive safety program, and whereas, etc. And then, of course, that's Harry Truman, and then this one obviously is also Harry Truman. Whereas American mothers have ever nurtured the ideals which foster and enrich a true democracy. And if you want to come back and read this, you can follow the link to it. American Education Week by President Reagan. So that's another proclamation. Again, you can come back and read it if you like. And the National Drunk and Drugged Driving Awareness Week proclamation. I forgot to ask you if you remembered. Yes, the Emancipation Proclamation. And sadly, I can't see well enough to read that, but I suspect even if I could, the writing may be hard to read. Presidential proclamations. Presidential proclamations are announcements of policy from the president. The vast majority of proclamations are issued to announce and support a ceremonial event, such as National African American History Month or National Hurricane Awareness Week. There are, however, some substantive proclamations that deal with tariff or other trade issues that are important for research purposes. All proclamations are first published in the Federal Register in the Presidential Documents section. They are compiled annually in Title III of the Code of Federal Regulations, the weekly compilation of presidential documents, and United States Code, Congressional and Administrative News also publish presidential proclamations. You know where else you could probably find them is on the websites of the libraries of each president. So we mentioned federal regulations in the last slide. This link goes to a PDF that explains the organization of the Federal Register because it's complicated. So let's just go to one of these to see what it looks like in the volumes. There it is. And in the issues that come out monthly, they get their own section. In the volumes, they're in chronological order, intermixed with things, but in the pamphlets, they get their own section. So, what's a federal regulation? The Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, is the codification of the general and permanent rules published in the Federal Register by departments and agencies of the federal government. The difference between an act and regulation. Regulations are subordinate legislation that are found associated with most of the acts. What happens after USCCAN? After it's a bill and after they've recorded the making of the bill, then once it's passed the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the President, it becomes a statute. A new statute is known as a slip law. It is published as a pamphlet and assigned a number as a public law or a private law. And that's where you'll remember the 114 will mean that it came from the 114th Congress. And 315, it was the 315th bill, public bill of that Congress. There are also private bills, and they are not contained in the USCCAN. Session laws are all of the statutes from a particular session of Congress. So the 114th Congress, there's session laws for that entire time period. They are published in chronological order in statutes at large. So volumes called statutes at large contain the session laws from a particular session. United States Code is the next step. Codification of these laws is a topical classification of federal statutes. So one law like that 114-315 will be coded into various titles because the law will probably address more than one issue. Provisions from a statute are or will be codified in the United States Code. In some cases, different sections from a statute may end up in a different title or chapter in the United States Code. So you remember what titles are. You've heard of Title 11, bankruptcy. Title 7 is agriculture, and Title 12 is banks and banking. Remember that because it'll come up again. More titles. More titles. There's 54 in total, but number 53 is blank. It's been reserved for future issues. So also in USCCAN are finding aids, tables to help you find the laws that you're looking for. So we're looking for 100-232. 100-232, there it is, and we can find it on page 1566 in Statutes at Large. It's also in the Congressional and Administrative News, and it will have that 1566 indicator, page indicator. Classifications. This one shows the titles that a bill was classified into. So down here is 100-232, page 1566 through 1568, and 1568 is party. No, just 1566. That's a new bill. So Title 7, agriculture, and is that the? Oh, I guess maybe it's all Title 7 for that one. Okay, it's all Title 7. And we'll skip that one. It's pretty basic. Legislative history, that one's helpful if you just want a quick answer for when it was passed, basically, and whether there were reports. $32, there's ours. Passed by the House on December 14th, passed by the Senate December 17th. Signing statements, I will lead you to the signing statement, bills and joint resolutions. Look it up. I think on that one you have to look up the House report. House of Representatives. Bill number. Proclamations, popular names. That's a fun one because they don't just get bill numbers, they get what they're being called. So ours is Charitable Assistance and Food Bank Act of 1987, page 1566. So besides that, just a quick explanation that the lists of the House of Representatives, the lists of the Senate, and who the president is are also in these volumes. They're in the first volume, and I think they're repeated again in the second volume. So they're in alphabetical order, the Senate in alphabetical order. I'll show you one of those. It shows what party they belong to, what state, what city, and what committees they belong to. So then there's committees, House Select and Special Committees. Let's look at that one. So this time you would look it up by the name of the committee and then see who's on it. And the rest are pretty similar. There's a treaty. We may not have scanned or scrolled down as far as that, but it was just the table of contents for the treaty that was on the PDF. And that's it. Then you get to the questions. So I will let you do that. You'll need to download the slides. So you've got a link to the slides that came with a link to the video. So yeah, download the slides. They may be the difference between PowerPoint in Microsoft and PowerPoint in Google. If you download them rather than look at them on Google, you may have to live with the with the formatting being off, or you can fix the formatting. They're not exactly the same. Okay, that's it. Thank you for listening and see you next time. Bye. Well, she says bye when she can't I can never find the way to turn it off quickly. Okay. Now, goodbye. Have a great day.